So hey man, you want to catch a movie this weekend?
Sure, man. What's playing?
Oh, the theater downtown is playing an extended cut of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Really? That sounds good. Which one is that again?
Oh, it's the one where Indy has to find the Holy Grail before the Nazis do.
We have been monitoring this conversation and have determined that the subject you are talking about goes against our community standards on hate groups or dangerous individuals. You will not be able to have a phone conversation or text message for 24 hours.
Okay, we really need to talk about this. I want to start this video out with saying that nothing I'm expressing in this video is inherently political from either side. I've wanted to make this video for over a year. I've avoided it because, honestly, I was afraid of talking about this subject. We live in an extremely polarized time. If you say the wrong thing or think a specific way, then half the country wants nothing to do with you. Worse, many want to destroy your entire life for simply holding the wrong position. I have overtly and intentionally avoided politics on this channel for that very reason. If you're a Republican, then I want to show you tips and tricks on how to make your computer experience better. And if you're a Democrat, I want to show you tips and tricks on how to make your computer experience better. In short, I don't care who you vote for. That's not what this channel is about. This channel has nothing to do with politics, and I don't want to claim a position on either side, primarily because I don't want to alienate half of my audience over a position that's completely unrelated to my channel. I think it's stupid when content creators do that. Computers don't care about your politics, and I don't either. So, with all that said, we have a major issue that I simply can't avoid talking about any longer because it directly affects me as a content creator, and ultimately it affects everyone who uses the internet. As a content creator, one of the most important rights we have in the United States of America is the freedom of speech. My entire existence on YouTube is based on that right. I kind of like being on YouTube, so that right is pretty important to me. But that right is being threatened. In fact, no, I'm sorry. Threatened is not the right word. It's straight up being violated. And honestly, I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I'm sure that everyone by this point has heard about the Twitter files. If you haven't, I'll give you a brief summary of what they are. For several years, people have believed that the US government was colluding with social media companies to censor American citizens. And for several years, this has been considered a conspiracy theory. However, after Elon Musk purchased Twitter, he has started releasing internal communications between Twitter and the federal government. And it turns out everything people believed was happening. And in many cases, it was way worse than people originally imagined. If you haven't read them yet, then I highly recommend it. But be prepared to be a little pissed. Also, it's been revealed that this is happening more than just on Twitter, but on all social media platforms, including YouTube. We just don't know to what extent. However, it's likely just as bad, but that's just my guess. Now, before people in the comment section start applying blame, this has not been coming from just one political party. They've all been doing it. Believe it or not, the US government has been involved in a bipartisan initiative to violate one of the most fundamental rights of American citizens, the freedom of speech. For people that aren't from America, let me take a second to explain freedom of speech from an American context. In this country, the government does not have the right to tell people what they can and can't say. This is enshrined in the First Amendment of our Constitution. Freedom of speech is an absolute right that the government cannot infringe. There are some exceptions to this. Obviously, you're not allowed to defame someone. However, defamation lawsuits are extremely hard to prove because you have to prove that the person who defamed you did it intentionally. As essentially, you have to prove that they knew they were lying about you when they did it, and that's obviously extremely hard to prove because if they said something about you that they thought was true, then that falls under free speech. However, even with defamation, it's not illegal. Like, you're gonna go to jail for it. Someone can sue you, and if they win, you'll have to pay them. A good example of this is the Johnny Depp trial that recently happened. Another exception to the freedom of speech is incitement. Many people use the example that you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. However, that's not entirely true. You are actually allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. if there's a fire. The specific example is talking about saying something that's untrue that leads to other people getting physically harmed. The specific verbiage used by the Supreme Court in this exception is if what you say causes imminent lawless action. In the case of yelling fire in a crowded theater, when there is no fire, people can get injured as the crowd is running out of the theater. Also, this only applies to implicit lawless actions happening as a result of your speech. Someone calling you a name does not fall into that category. I was born in the late 70s. My childhood took place in the 80s when political correctness was in its infancy in America. However, back then, no one really took it seriously. In fact, it was kind of used as the butt of jokes most of the time. The problem with political correctness is it essentially takes the exception of incitement and applies it to feelings. The idea is that people aren't allowed to hurt your feelings in the same way that they're not allowed to, cause a riot. The reason why this is inherently incompatible with the First Amendment is because the First Amendment was explicitly written to protect unpopular speech. To put it bluntly, the First Amendment protects your right to be a jerk. There's absolutely nothing the government can do or laws they can pass to stop you from being a jerk. This might be where the saying came from that sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never hurt you. I don't know. But you know what? This means that we're dealing with another issue now, and that's with dis and misinformation. These are actually two different things that are commonly treated as the same thing. But they're actually not. In fact, misinformation is when someone says something that is untrue unknowingly. They might repeat something that's false that they hear from someone else, but they believe it's true when it's really not. Disinformation, on the other hand, is when someone says something that is untrue knowingly. They're saying this untrue thing for the sole purpose of deceiving people. A good example of this would be political propaganda. Now, this one's a little complicated because obviously there's false information that can lead to physical harm. So it would seem that this subject would fall into the exception to free speech for incitement. However, this simply isn't the case. I'm not going to use any examples here because honestly, I don't want those examples to be detected by the YouTube algorithm and get my video deleted. That's kind of the crux of the problem here. But essentially, what this comes down to is who's the arbiter of truth and how do we determine if a person is knowingly or unknowingly spreading false information? Because ultimately, proving that someone is speaking disinformation and not misinformation would be just as hard as proving defamation. You would have to be able to prove what the person knew at the time they said it. Did they know they were lying? Or were they just passing off false information that they heard from someone else? Believe it or not though, there's a great solution to this dilemma. That solution is free speech. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter if the person was spreading falsehoods intentionally or not. They're false either way, right? But when everyone has an equal voice in the debate, the truth will come out. In fact, the only thing censorship succeeds in doing is protecting disinformation, not eliminating it. In fact, what's even worse is how many things have been labeled misinformation to only be later determined to be true. So, while the government is colluding with social media companies to remove misinformation, and that misinformation turns out to be true information, then not only has the government violated the First Amendment, but you've been punished for being right. But either way, the First Amendment still grants you the right to be wrong if you are. The government has no right to censor you, even if you're wrong. Earlier, I mentioned political correctness. While it was in its infancy in America when I was growing up, it wasn't a new concept. In fact, it was a relatively old concept. The term political correctness was first used during the Marxist Revolution in Russia in 1917. Back then, political correctness wasn't just a social issue like it is today. The government outlawed anyone from saying anything negative about the communist regime. This allowed them to spread whatever disinformation they wanted because if anyone spoke out against it, they were just thrown in gulags. This is why freedom of speech is so important, and this is why it is so terrifying that our government is flagrantly violating this right on a regular basis. Because, as far as I'm concerned, the only motive the government has for regulating speech is so that they can say whatever they want without any objection. And ultimately, that's what's happening. Think about it for a second. No one is getting deplatformed for claiming the earth is flat. or claiming the moon landing was fake. There's lots of false information being spread on social media with absolutely no one calling for its regulation. It's only certain topics that are being talked about, and it seems all of these topics are directly related to what the government wants censored. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't want to be on the same side of history as communist Russia. Just saying, that didn't turn out so great. Censorship never solves any problems. In fact, it creates more problems. For instance, take misinformation. When people are deplatformed for spreading misinformation, they don't just stay off the internet. A multitude of alternative platforms have been created for them to use, and these platforms are echo chambers. In fact, the major platforms are starting to turn into echo chambers themselves because people are being deplatformed as well as self-censorship. Echo chambers are dangerous because they have no provision for correcting falsehoods. When you have people who all believe the same things but never interact with anyone who disagrees with them, their beliefs are never challenged. So that misinformation can spread like wildfire. We are literally watching that happen in real time right now. It's like there's a bunch of different alternate realities taking place at the same time based on what echo chamber you happen to be part of. And you know what? You might say that if everyone was allowed to speak freely, then people could say stuff that's false. Or worse, they could be mean. And yeah, you're right. Not only could that happen, but it will. With the popularity of social media platforms and the anonymity that these platforms have created, an environment where lots of people are able to be jerks and even lie. But it also allows people to be kind and truthful. What we don't want to happen is for a single entity to be the arbiter of what is kind and what is truth, because ultimately that single entity will be corrupt, and that single entity will use that power to lie to everyone. Ultimately, the best arbiter of truth is public discourse. Let the best argument win. That's why no one believes that the earth is flat, and that's why no one believes the moon landing was faked, because people are allowed to talk about it. In George Orwell's book 1984, there was a Ministry of Truth. This was a government agency whose sole purpose was to manipulate the population by declaring what was true and false based on their own directives. Ultimately, the truth was never determined by what was actually true, but instead kept the party in Oceania in power. They even created their own language called Newspeak to make it so people could not even speak anything that wasn't allowed by not allowing them the words to express it. You may think that that's an exaggeration of what's currently taking place, but is it really? I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I've wanted to make this video for over a year, but I didn't out of fear. In fact, the script for the telephone call at the beginning of this video was literally written over a year ago. This is called self-censorship. It's a direct result of being trained on not only what not to say, but what not to think. There will probably be ramifications for me releasing this video. Maybe those ramifications will be a couple of people in the comments calling me names. I know. The irony is pretty funny. Using your free speech to get mad at someone for defending free speech. I get it. But you know what? YouTube might also just give me a strike and take my video down. It could happen. If they do though, just know that I have a Rumble account and all of my videos are there too. I'll leave a link at the description below, just in case. But nothing I've said today should be controversial. You may not want to see or hear what some people have to say, but just because you don't want to hear it doesn't mean that they don't have the right to say it. Another really cool feature that we have on social media is the ability to block and ignore people. You don't have to listen to arguments that you don't like, but when did we become a society where if someone doesn't like something, they have to eliminate it completely? I mean, seriously, what happened to us? This is America. The land of the free, the home of the brave. When did we turn into a police state where everyone has to be babysat? I think it's time that everyone from both sides comes together and says enough is enough. Divided, we are weak, but unified, we are a force that cannot be beaten. This country has proven that time and time again. If you don't agree with me, then fine. I respect your right to disagree, and I would fight to the death to protect your right to hold and express that opposing view. I mean, I may block you, but just because I don't want to hear it doesn't mean that I don't think you have the right to say it. All I ask is that you don't oppose my right to express my opinion as well. You're free to block me too if you want. Ultimately, the person who should be in control of who they listen to and who they don't is you, not some all-powerful government agency deciding who has the right to speak and who doesn't. I just have to say it one more time. The best arbiter of truth is public discourse. Let the best debate win. With all that said, the first person who can guess who I was talking to on the phone in the conversation at the beginning of the video wins. You don't actually win anything, but you'll have my admiration. Anyway, this was a deep topic, and typically at this point of the video, I would point you to another related video, but I don't have any other related videos to this topic. So just check out whatever YouTube populates right here. If this is your first time seeing one of my videos, this is not the topic of conversation that we typically talk about. But if you like seeing computer how-tos, then hit the subscribe button. And if you like this video, then hit the like button. And you can also hit the dislike button if you want. I won't hold it against you. Anyway, as always, you guys have a great day.